Ghosts of the 228. In the heart of modern Taipei, amidst the bustling streets and neon lights, the echoes of a tragic past still linger. Whispers in the Wind, Echoes of the 228, is a haunting tale that weaves through the sorrowful legacy of the 228 massacre in Taiwan. This gripping narrative follows Lin, a young journalist, as she uncovers the hidden stories of those lost to history's shadow. As Lin delves deeper into the events of 1947, she encounters the restless spirits of the victims, each carrying their untold stories and seeking closure. Through her journey, Lin confronts the chilling realities of the past, uncovering truths that have long been buried under the facade of a city that never sleeps. This story is not just a ghostly tale, but a journey through the pain, resilience, and hope of a nation scarred by its history. Lin Mei, a young journalist in Taipei, had always been drawn to the untold stories hidden within the crevices of history. On a humid afternoon in Taipei, as she meandered through a bustling street market, her eyes landed on a collection of antique photographs at an old vendor's stall. Amidst the sepia-toned memories of strangers, one photograph caught her attention, a black-and-white image of a group of people, their faces etched with hope. Intrigued, Lin asked the vendor about the photograph's origin. With wrinkles mapping the history on his face, the old man shrugged. Found it in an old house nearby. Some say these houses whisper stories of the old Taiwan, stories long forgotten. Back at her small apartment, Lin studied the photograph. The faces seemed to speak of a tale untold, a slice of history lost in the annals of time. She decided to delve deeper into the history of the 228 massacre, a topic often glossed over in her school history books. The 228 massacre, as she discovered, was a dark period in Taiwan's history. A brutal crackdown that began on February 28, 1947, leading to thousands of deaths and disappearances. It was a taboo subject that older generations hesitated to speak of. As Lin dug through archives and old newspapers, she felt the weight of the untold stories. She first heard it during one long night of research, a faint whisper, almost like a sigh, coming from the corner of her room. Startled, she looked around, but there was nothing but the silent hum of her laptop and the distant chatter of the city. The following days saw Lin Mei's life enveloped in a cloak of mystique and history. Once a sanctuary of solitude, her apartment echoed with the soft, indistinct murmurs that seemed to seep through the walls. These whispers, though unintelligible, carried a sense of urgency, a need to communicate. Determined to uncover the source of these mysterious occurrences, Lin dove deeper into her research. She visited the National Archives, poring over dusty documents and faded newspapers, trying to piece together the events of 1947. The more she read, the more the whispers seemed to intensify, as if the spirits of the past were growing impatient, longing for their stories to be told. One evening, as she sifted through an old diary at the archives, a sudden gust of wind blew through the room, turning the pages rapidly. Lin's eyes caught a glimpse of a handwritten note in the margin of a page. "They silenced our voices, but our spirits remain." Chills ran down her spine. It felt as though the diary was speaking directly to her. That night, Lin lay in bed, restless. The whispers seemed to form coherent sentences now, fragmented yet poignant. "Remember us," they seemed to say. "Tell our story." Lin realized that these whispers were not mere figments of her imagination. They were the voices of those who had perished during the massacre, reaching out to her across the decades. The following day, Lin revisited the 228 Peace Memorial Park. As she walked through the same path as before, she noticed how the atmosphere seemed different in daylight, less foreboding yet still somber with the weight of history. She sat on a bench, closing her eyes, focusing on the whispers accompanying her. To her astonishment, She began to discern individual voices among the whispers. There was a trembling voice of an older man, full of sorrow and regret. A young woman's voice, sharp with anger and unfulfilled dreams. A child's voice, confused and scared. Each voice told a fragment of their story, their lives cut short by the brutality of the massacre. Lynn opened her eyes, her heart heavy with the burden of these untold stories. She knew what she had to do. She needed to give these voices a platform to bring their stories into the light. But how could she, a lone journalist, unravel and narrate the complex tapestry of pain and suffering the spirits represented? As she pondered this, a sudden realization struck her. The park was not just a memorial, it was a conduit between the past and the present, a place where the spirits of the victims lingered, seeking closure. Lynn decided that she would document these voices, these stories, in her articles. She would use her skills as a journalist to give voice to the voiceless, to ensure that their whispers were heard loud and clear in the modern world. But as Lynn set out on this path, she couldn't shake off the feeling that she was being pulled into something much larger than herself. The whispers were no longer sounds in the night. They had become a part of her, guiding her, urging her to uncover the hidden truths of a dark chapter in Taiwan's history. As the sun set over Taipei, the voices grew louder, and Lynn knew that her journey had only begun. The shadows of the past were starting to emerge into the light, and she was the medium through which their stories would finally be told. The whispers of the past were no longer echoes. They were becoming a symphony of truth, demanding to be heard. Lin Mei's journey into the heart of Taipei's forgotten history continued, now guided by the whispers that had become her constant companions. With its modern facade, the city seemed to her like a palimpsest, holding layers of untold stories beneath its surface. As she walked the bustling streets, the whispers guided her, leading her to places where the spirits of the 228 massacre lingered. One such place was a narrow, unassuming alley between towering skyscrapers. As Lynn entered the alley, the atmosphere changed. The noises of the city faded into a hushed silence, and the air grew colder. Here, the whispers were stronger, more insistent. Lynn could sense the presence of a spirit, a victim of the massacre, tethered to this spot by the trauma of the past. The spirit, a middle-aged man with sorrowful eyes, materialized before her. He told Lynn his story, a story of a simple shopkeeper who had been caught in the violent protests, accused of being a dissident, and executed without trial. His family never knew what happened to him. His life was erased from history, as if he had never existed. Lynn listened, her heart heavy with the weight of his words. She promised to tell his story and acknowledge his existence and unjust end. As she made this vow, the spirit's form faded, his eyes expressing gratitude. In that moment, Lynn realized that her role was not just to uncover the truth, but also to provide a sense of closure to these restless souls. Encouraged by this encounter, Lynn continued her exploration. She visited other sites around the city, old buildings that had witnessed the brutality of the massacre parks that had once been sites of peaceful protests, turned violent. At each place, she encountered more spirits, each eager to share their story with someone willing to listen. One such spirit was a young woman whose life was cut short just as she was about to start a family. Another was an elderly teacher, mourned by students who never understood why he had suddenly disappeared. Each story added a new thread to the tapestry of injustice that Lynn was unraveling. As she documented these encounters, Lynn's articles began to attract attention. People started to talk about the forgotten history of the 228 massacre, discussing it in cafes, on social media, and in the news. The city was beginning to confront its past, stirred by the voices that Lynn had brought into the light. However, not everyone was pleased with Lynn's revelations. She received anonymous threats warning her to stop digging into the past. But Lynn was undeterred. She knew her path was fraught with challenges, but she also knew the truth was too important to be buried. As Lin walked through the city, she felt a profound connection with the past. Once just thoroughfares in her daily life, the streets of Taipei now felt like bridges spanning time, connecting her to the stories of those who had walked them before. The city was speaking to her, and she was listening. With each step, Lin felt the whispers growing louder, not just the voices of individual spirits, but the collective voice of history, demanding acknowledgement. She knew that her journey was far from over. There were more stories to be told, more spirits seeking peace. Lin was ready to listen, write, and bring the echoes of the past into the present. The impact of Lin May's articles on the 228 massacre started rippling through Taipei, stirring up memories and conversations long suppressed. As she became more entwined with the echoes of the past, Lin realized that she needed deeper insights to understand the tragedy's breadth truly. That's when she heard about Mr. Chen, a nonagenarian with a connection to the events of 1947. Lin found Mr. Chen in a quiet, old neighborhood, starkly contrasting to the bustling city center. His home was a small, traditional Taiwanese house, adorned with old photographs and relics from a bygone era. Mr. Chen, a frail man with a gentle demeanor, welcomed her with a warm, melancholy smile. As they sat down, Lin noticed a certain heaviness in the air, a sense of unspoken stories clinging to the room's walls. Mr. Chen began to recount his tale, his voice a whisper barely louder than the distant hum of the city. He spoke of his youth, of the hope and optimism that had filled the air in Taiwan after the end of World War II. But that hope was short-lived, crushed under the brutal force of the Kuomintang regime. Mr. Chen's story was a first-hand account of the events that led to the horrific 228 massacre. He spoke of the arbitrary arrests, the ruthless killings, and the unspeakable horrors he had witnessed. His brother had been taken away in the middle of the night, never to return. Mr. Chen had lived through the terror, the grief, and the oppressive silence that followed. Listening to Mr. Chen, Lin felt like she was peering into a dark abyss full of pain and suffering. His story was not just a personal account, it was a piece of the larger puzzle of Taiwan's history, a piece that had been hidden. Mr. Chen also spoke of the aftermath of the decades of silence and fear that had engulfed Taiwan. "We learn to live with our grief," he said, "but the ghosts of the past never really left us." He told Lin about the secret gatherings, where people would share their stories and console each other, keeping the memories of their lost loved ones alive in hushed tones. As the afternoon sun faded, casting long shadows across the room, Mr. Chen handed Lin a small old notebook. "This was my brother's," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "He wrote about his dreams, his hopes, and his fears. Maybe it can help you understand." Lin accepted the notebook with a sense of reverence. It was not just a collection of pages, it was a testament to a life cut short, a voice silenced too soon. She thanked Mr. Chen, promising to honor the stories. That evening, as Lin read through the notebook, the whispers around her seemed to quiet down, as if in respect for the words she was reading. The notebook was a window into a turbulent time, filled with never-fulfilled aspirations and dreams that turned into nightmares. Lin realized that her journey was not just about uncovering the dark secrets of the past. It was about restoring the humanity of those who had suffered, about giving them a voice through her writing. Mr. Chen and his brother's stories were just two of the many lost in the shadow of the massacre. As Lin closed the notebook, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. She was no longer just a journalist but a keeper of secrets, a conduit for the voices that had been silenced. The journey ahead was daunting, but Lin knew she had to continue illuminating history's unseen shadows. The small, worn notebook of Mr. Chen's brother became Lin May's companion in the following days. Each page she turned unraveled more about the life of a young man whose future was brutally snatched away. As Lin absorbed the words filled with hope, fear, and unfulfilled dreams, the whispers around her seemed to take on a new tone of understanding. During this intense reading and reflection period, Lynn began to experience vivid, unsettling dreams. As she drifted into sleep each night, her mind was transported back to the tumultuous days of 1947. The dreams were so real and vivid that Lynn felt she was living through the events herself. In her dreams, she walked the streets of a different Taipei filled with fear and suspicion. She saw faces marked by despair, heard the cries of those being dragged away by soldiers, and felt the palpable tension that hung in the air. These nocturnal journeys were not mere dreams, but glimpses into the lives that the massacre had irrevocably altered. One night, Lynn dreamt of a young woman, her face a picture of determination and terror. In the dream, Lynn followed the woman through a series of narrow alleys as she tried desperately to evade the soldiers pursuing her. The chase ended at a dead end, where the woman, with nowhere to go, turned to face her pursuers. The look in her eyes, a mix of defiance and resignation, stayed with Lynn long after she woke up. Haunted by the intensity of these dreams, Lynn found it increasingly difficult to separate her waking life from the world she visited in her sleep. The boundaries between past and present were blurring, and the shadows of grief were enveloping her. Lynn poured her experiences into her articles, determined to give voice to these shadows. She wrote not just about the facts of the massacre, but also about the human stories, the dreams shattered, and the lives torn apart. Her words were a bridge between the Taipei of today and the city that had witnessed such unspeakable horrors. As her articles gained more attention, Lynn started receiving letters from people across Taiwan. Some thanked her for shedding light on a painful part of their history, while others shared their own family stories related to the massacre. It became increasingly clear to Lynn that the tragedy of 1947 was not just a historical event, but a wound that continued to affect the lives of many. Amidst this, Lynn received an invitation to speak at a commemorative event for the 228 massacre. It was an opportunity to bring the stories she had uncovered to a larger audience, to ensure that the present heard the past. As the event day approached, Lynn felt a growing sense of responsibility. She wasn't just representing herself. She was representing the countless souls who had suffered in silence. She prepared her speech, imbuing it with the experiences of the people she had connected with, both living and deceased. The event was held in the 228 Peace Memorial Park, a fitting location for a ceremony that sought to heal the scars of the past. As Lynn took the stage, she looked at the crowd, a mix of young and old. Lynn began to speak, her voice steady and clear. She talked about the stories she had uncovered, the dreams that had been shared with her, and the importance of acknowledging and learning from the past. Her words resonated with the audience, bridging the gap between generations and bringing the shadows of grief into the light. As she concluded her speech, Lynn felt a sense of peace settle over her. She had done her part in honoring the memories of those who had perished. The whispers that had guided her on this journey seemed to quiet down, as if approving her efforts to give voice to the voiceless. Lynn knew that her journey was far from over, but she had taken an essential step in healing the wounds of the past. The shadows of grief might never entirely disappear. Still, acknowledging and remembering them could transform them into something more, a testament to resilience, a beacon of hope for future generations. After the commemorative event, Lynn May's role as a bridge between the past and present became more prominent. Her speech touched many hearts, bringing forward a wave of individuals eager to share their connections to the 228 massacre. Among these, a crucial encounter would lead Lynn to a revelation that would change the course of her journey. An older man, Mr. Wu, contacted Lynn, claiming to possess information that had been hidden for decades. Intrigued, Lynn met him in a quaint tea house nestled in one of the older districts of Taipei. Mr. Wu, a former government official in his late 80s, had an air of solemnity. Over cups of fragrant oolong tea, Mr. Wu began to unravel a story that layers of secrecy had concealed. He spoke of a clandestine operation during the massacre, where individuals were targeted not for their supposed descent, but for their knowledge and possessions. According to Mr. Wu, these included intellectuals, business owners, and artists who were seen as threats to the regime, not because of their political inclinations, but because of their influence and assets. Lin listened, her mind racing as she processed the implications of Mr. Wu's revelations. This wasn't just a story of political suppression, calculated appropriation, and hidden agendas. The gravity of this information was overwhelming. It shed new light on the events of the massacre, suggesting that the motivations were even more complex and sinister than she had thought. Mr. Wu, burdened by years of guilt, handed Lin a small, locked box. "This contains documents and items I was ordered to collect from those we took away," he confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "I kept it all these years, hoping the truth would come out someday." Lin, with a mixture of apprehension and determination, accepted the box. Inside, she found a trove of personal items: diaries, letters, photographs, and even some precious family heirlooms. Each item was a silent witness to a life disrupted, a story cut short.